Let's talk about something we all experience, something invisible but incredibly real inside us. The battles our minds create. Battles that often don't even exist outside of our own heads. You see, so much of what we suffer, the anxiety, the dread, the sleepless nights, it isn't from actual danger or real problems, but from the stories our minds spin before anything even happens. It's like preparing for a fight that never comes, standing on the battlefield of imagination, exhausted and wounded, while the real world moves quietly past us. Imagine you wake up one morning, and before your feet even hit the floor, your mind starts racing. Maybe it's that presentation at work, or a difficult conversation you have to have, or a problem with a friend or family member. Instead of facing what's in front of you calmly and clearly, your mind begins to build a scenario. A worst-case scenario. You picture every possible failure, every awkward silence, every angry word. Suddenly your heart pounds, your stomach knots, and your day has barely begun. But here's the catch: none of this has happened yet. It's all in your head. This is what I mean when I say your mind creates unseen battles that don't exist. The struggle, the pain, the fear, it's all manufactured by your imagination. You're fighting an enemy that's never shown up. You're wearing armor and wielding against shadows. And yet, this mental battle feels so real. It's exhausting and debilitating. It's like trying to stop the wind or catch a ghost. Why does this happen? Because our brains evolved to protect us. They're constantly scanning for threats, trying to prepare us for danger so we can survive. But in the modern world, the threats are often not lions or wild storms. They're abstract, psychological, and uncertain. Your mind fills in the blanks with scenarios that might never come true, but it does so to keep you alert. The problem is, this alertness becomes chronic worry, and worry becomes suffering. The irony is that while you're busy preparing for every possible disaster, you miss the moments that actually need your attention. You lose sight of the real battles, the real conversations, real challenges. Because you're stuck in a fog of imagined pain. The energy you pour into these mental fights drains your focus and your spirit. You're tired before you even start the race. This invisible war inside you is the thief of peace. It robs you of your calm, your confidence, and your ability to act decisively. You become trapped in loops of what-ifs and maybes, replaying scenarios like a broken record. But the truth is, most of these imagined dangers will never materialize. The late-night fears, the anxiety spirals, the endless self-questioning, they rarely match reality. And here's what's even more profound: by engaging in these battles that don't exist, you often create real problems. Your stress manifests physically. Tight muscles, headaches, poor sleep. Your mood soars, your relationships strain. You approach real-life challenges a clouded mind and heavy heart, making it harder to respond effectively. The mind's imaginary war spills over into reality, complicating life unnecessarily. What if you could recognize when your mind starts setting up these phantom fights? What if you could step back and say, "Wait a minute, this battle is just in my imagination." That recognition is the first step toward freedom. You don't have to be dragged into every war your mind proposes. You don't have to believe every dark prediction it offers. You can observe the thoughts without getting entangled in them. Imagine holding a remote control to your mind. You notice the anxiety rising, but instead of pressing play on the fearful scenario, you press pause. You become the commander, not the victim. You start to see that many battles are rehearsals, not realities, and when you face actual conflict, you meet it with clarity and strength, not confusion and fear. This is not about denying problems or pretending everything is fine. It's about discerning which battles are real and which are illusions. It's about redirecting your Newton fighting ghosts to solving actual challenges. When your mind stops manufacturing these unseen wars, you reclaim your peace. You become a calm warrior, steady and prepared. So, the next time your mind drags you into a fight that hasn't happened, pause, breathe. Remind yourself this battle is imaginary. Don't give power to shadows. Walk away from the war your mind is inventing and step into the present moment where real strength and calm reside. That's where life truly begins. There's something remarkable about the human imagination. It has the power to create entire worlds, to dream of possibilities, and to envision futures far beyond what we see. But that same imagination, as powerful as it is, has a dangerous side when it comes to how we experience pain and suffering. It's a double-edged sword. You see, imagination doesn't just help us fail or create, it also amplifies pain, often making problems seem far worse than they actually are. And when reality finally arrives, you find it's usually far more manageable than what your mind had prepared you for. Think about a time you were dreading something. A confrontation, a difficult conversation, a health scare, or even a financial problem. The moment you allowed yourself to imagine the worst, it began to feel overwhelming. You pictured all the ways things could go wrong, all the suffering you might endure, the embarrassment, the failure. The problem wasn't just the situation itself, but the emotional weight your imagination threw on top of it. It was like turning up the volume on pain, cranking it to 11 before the first note even played. This is a common trap. Our minds, with their vivid creativity, tend to paint exaggerated pictures of future hardships. We invent layers of complication, spinning out endless what-ifs that multiply our anxiety and fear. The pain becomes larger in our heads than it is in reality, and that distortion shapes how we approach life. We hesitate, procrastinate, and sometimes even avoid dealing with situations that in truth are manageable or even minor once we face them. Reality, on the other hand, often has a way of humbling these meal mountains we build. When the moment of truth arrives, you see the challenge in its actual form. Not the monster you feared, but something much more tangible and solvable. Maybe it's not painless, but it's within your capacity to handle it. The fears you rehearsed endlessly don't all come true. The suffering you imagine doesn't consume you. The problem doesn't break you. And that realization is liberating. Why does this happen? Because imagination amplifies every detail. It zooms in on the worst-case scenario, layering it with emotions that aren't grounded in present reality. The mind adds drama and depth, making fear feel immersive and merciful. But reality strips all that away. Reality forces you to deal with facts, actions, and outcomes that are often simpler, clearer, and more manageable than what your imagination concocted. This is important because how you experience pain and difficulty shapes your life. If you live in your mind's exaggerated drama, you will suffer unnecessarily. You'll be overwhelmed by feelings that, though powerful, are built on shadows. You'll shrink from challenges that, in their actual form, you could face with courage and resilience. But if you can learn to separate your imagination from reality, to recognize when your mind is amping up the pain, you gain tremendous power. You can approach problems with a clearer perspective, reducing your anxiety and fear. Instead of running from challenges, you meet them head-on, knowing that you have the strength to handle whatever is real. Let's be clear. This is not about dismissing pain or pretending everything is easy. Real pain and real problems do exist. But there's a crucial difference between the pain you anticipate in your mind and the pain you actually experience. And that difference is often the key to moving forward. When you realize imagination is playing tricks on you, you start questioning your assumptions. You ask yourself, is this pain real, or is it magnified by my mind? You learn to test your fears against reality. You give yourself permission to face the facts, to gather evidence, and to respond based on what actually is. not what might be. That shift can change everything. It transforms fear into manageable problems. It turns paralysis into action. It shifts your energy from avoidance to engagement. It brings calm to chaos. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is the ability to see clearly, to know when your imagination is mainly of more hills and when the real challenge is simply a hill you can climb. This clarity frees you to act wisely, to conserve your energy, and to live with more peace. So, next time your mind floods worst case scenarios and painful what-ifs, remember, your imagination is turning up the volume on pain that might not even exist yet. Reality is often more straightforward, more manageable than you think. Meet life as it is, not as your fears make it out to be. Only then will you find the strength to move forward without being weighed down by imagined suffering. And that's the truth that sets you free. It's incredible how the mind has this habit of drifting far away from the present moment, wandering into a maze of imagined fears and worries. When you do this, you give edgy suffering that doesn't actually exist yet. The suffering you feel is mostly a product of your own imagination, projecting into the future scenarios that may never come to pass. But here's the key: the way out of this trap is to anchor yourself in present reality, because the present moment is the only place where true power resides, where you can actually respond instead of just reacting to shadows. When your mind races ahead, caught up in what-ifs and worst-case scenarios, it's easy to get swallowed by anxiety and fear. You're haunted by imagined pain, troubles that your brain rehearses repeatedly. But if you pull yourself back to the now, the actual reality you're facing right this second, something shifts. The imagined suffering loses, because it's no longer feeding on your attention. You begin to see that the threats your mind has magnified aren't present here, aren't real yet, and may never be. This isn't about pretending that problems don't exist or forcing yourself to ignore potential challenges. It's about consciously choosing to focus on what's happening right now, the tangible facts, rather than the fog of speculation. Because here's the truth: the present moment is manageable. It's where your actions take place. It's where your choices have meaning. Imagined suffering lives in the ether or the past, places where you have little control. But the present is your territory. When you focus on present reality, you engage your senses. What do you feel? What is the real situation before you? Is the fear you're feeling backed up by actual evidence? Often, you'll find the reality is less dramatic than your mind's narrative. Maybe the problem is smaller, or you have resources to face that you hadn't considered because you were caught up in worry. This grounding effect helps diffusity of intensity of imagined suffering by reminding you that the situation isn't as dire as it seemed when viewed through the lens of fear. This moment-to-moment awareness gives you a kind of armor against the storm of anxious thoughts. It trains you to distinguish between real threats and those your mind invents. When you're fully present, your mind quiets because it doesn't need to protect you from shadows. You can respond with clarity, calm, and strategy instead of getting paralyzed by fear. This clarity allows you to break a cycle of worry that otherwise spirals endlessly. Think of the mind as a radio dial. When you tune into imagined suffering, it's like turning up static and noise. But when you tune into the present moment, the noise clears and you hear the music, the reality, much more clearly. This clarity brings power because now you're not a victim of imagined battles. You're a commander of your own responses, and it's a muscle you build. Like any skill, focusing on present reality takes practice. It might be uncomfortable at first because your mind loves to wander and catastrophize. But with regular effort, you'll find it easier to come back to the now, to breathe deeply, to observe without judgment, and to anchor your thoughts in what's real and immediate. Even in difficult situations, This approach transforms your existence. Instead of being overwhelmed by the magnitude of potential problems, you meet what is with courage and resolve. You take practical steps, one at a time, instead of being swept away by a tidal wave of imagined pain. It also frees you from the exhausting burden of carrying around future suffering that may never arrive. This liberation is not just about emotional relief. It's about reclaiming your energy and focus for what truly matters. When you stop feeding imagined suffering, you reclaim your power to act and live fully. So next time your mind pulls you to dark scenarios, pause, bring your attention back to what is happening now. Ask yourself, what is the reality I'm facing in this moment? Let that be your guide, your anchor, because only in the present can you disarm imagined suffering and move forward with clarity and strength. This is the quiet power of presence, a power they'll never see coming. That voice in your head, the one that spins stories, predicts disasters, assigns meaning to silence, to a glance, to every little setback. You've got to learn to challenge it. Not everything you imagine is true. In fact, much of it isn't. Your mind is a storyteller, and not always a reliable one. It crafts narratives that are rooted more in fear than in fact, and if you're not careful, you start living your life based on those false scripts. We all have that internal dialogue. And when we're not paying attention, it runs wild. One mistake becomes evidence that we're failures. One rejection becomes proof that we're unworthy. One uncertain moment is exaggerated into catastrophe. The problem isn't the situation itself. It's the story you attach to it. That's where suffering grows. Not in the event, but in the interpretation. The mind loves to fill in the blanks. When you don't have all the facts, it creates them. When you're uncertain, it invents reasons to be afraid. That silence from someone you care about. Your mind says, they must be angry. That opportunity you missed. You'll never get another one. That risk you're afraid to take. You're not good enough anyway. This voice isn't telling you the truth. It's projecting your fears, your wounds, your past failures, and painting them over your present and future. But here's the shift: you don't have to accept that narrative. You can interrupt it. You can question it. And when you do, you weaken its grip on you. Start by asking yourself, is this true? Not, does it feel true? Because fear feels real, pain feels real. But that doesn't mean the story behind it is. You've got to separate emotion from reality. What are the facts? What is actually happening right now? And what am I making up? It's like a courtroom. Imagine your inner voice is on the witness stand. Cross-examine it, demand evidence. If it says, you always mess things up, ask, really? Always? Or did I just mess up once? If it says, they don't respect you, ask, what did they actually say or do that proves that? Most of the time, you'll realize your case is built on assumptions, not on facts. That realization alone is powerful, because once you see that your narrative is flawed, you're free to rewrite it. Rewriting doesn't mean replacing negative lies with positive lies. It means anchoring yourself in what's real, what's balanced, what's grounded. You're not a failure. You failed once, Heb. You're not unlovable. One person didn't choose you. You're not doomed. You're facing a challenge. That clarity is your liberation. The best warriors aren't the ones who never feel fear. They're the ones who can look their fear in the eye and say, you don't get to make the final decision. And it's the same with your thoughts. You don't have to banish them. You just have to see them clearly and refuse to let them run your life. This takes practice. It takes daily awareness. That's why journaling is powerful. It lets you catch your thoughts on paper where you can observe them. Meditation helps too. It gives you the space to see found arise and let it pass, instead of grabbing onto it and building your identity around it. Most people live by default, not by design. They never pause to challenge their narrative, so their life becomes a loop of fear-based decisions and unconscious patterns. But not you. You're waking up. You're seeing that what you think isn't always the truth. And in that space between thought and reality, you find your freedom. That's where life begins to change. When you realize that most of your suffering was based on a story you didn't have to believe, that your peace was never lost. It was just buried beneath noise. That clarity doesn't come from controlling every outcome. It comes from controlling your interpretation. So the next time your mind starts stewing that old story, the one that says you're not enough, or you can't handle it, or it's all falling apart, stop, breathe, look it in the eye and ask, is this real? Or is this just my fear wearing a mask? Because when you stop blindly believing every thought that crosses your mind, you stop suffering from the ones that were never true to begin with. We live too much in our heads. Most of the time, the pain we're feeling isn't even real. It's what we think might happen. It's not the failure itself, but the imagined shame of it. Not the loss, but the forecasted grief. We react to scenarios that haven't happened, and may never happen. And while we're caught up in this illusion, while we're tangled in this mental suffering, we're doing nothing to actually shape our future. That's the cost of imagined pain. It steals your focus, your strength, your time, and gives you nothing real in return. But there's a way out of that loop. You stop reacting, and you start acting. Intentionally, constructively, grounded in what's real. Because that's where your power is. See, when you react, you're not thinking. You're just obeying your fear. It's an automatic loop. Something triggers anxiety, and you spiral. You avoid the risk. You shrink from the moment. You replay worst-case scenarios over and over again until your body thinks you're in danger when nothing's actually wrong. But here's the true thing. Your reaction isn't solving doom. It's feeding it. Every time you choose reaction over action, you reinforce the belief there gets the final say. That worry is more useful than effort. That survival matters more than progress. But you weren't made just to survive. You were made to create, to lead, to move forward even when the path is foggy. And that begins with this shift. From reacting to imaginary pain, to taking constructive action in reality. Not when you feel ready, not when the fear goes away, but while it's still there. That's how you weaken its grip. You take a small step. You do the next right thing. You make the call, write the page, go to the meeting, speak your truth, show up, even if your hands shake. And something incredible happens when you dog. Your brain starts to recalibrate. It starts to learn that you die just because you were uncomfortable, that you don't fall apart because the future's uncertain, that you don't have to wait for fear to disappear before you move. Because action, real action, has the power to dispel fear. We think clarity comes from thinking, but it doesn't. It comes from you doing. You don't figure it all out in your head. You figure it out on the field, through effort, through trial and error, through failing forward. Thinking has its place, yes, but overthinking, that's the enemy of execution. And let's be honest, a lot of your imagined pain comes from trying to control things you were never meant to control. Other people's opinions, the outcome of events, the past, the future. But control is found in just one place, your response, your attitude, your daily action. That's the only terrain you actually own. So work that land. Plant seeds there. Build there. Let your fear inform you, not control you. Let it be a signal, not a sentence. If it tells you what matters, good. Let it wake you up to the urgency of your purpose. But don't let it dictate your behavior. You are not your thoughts. You are not your projections. You are the one who chooses what to do next ebb. And what you do next doesn't have to be massive. It just has to be you forward. Stranalizia you feel all the time. Stop sitting in the waiting room of your own life, waiting for the perfect moment. Perfection is paralysis, disguised. Date the step, send the message, start the project, learn the skill, build the habit. Action builds momentum, and momentum builds belief. This is how you take back your power, not by winning imaginary battles in your head, but by showing up for the real ones. With your hands dirty, your heart steady, and your focus on what you can control. You want to feel stronger, then act stronger. You want peace, then take action that aligns with peace. You want freedom from worry, then move forward in spite of it, because nothing changes until you do.